The signal came from the edge of known space, desperate, universal, and impossible to ignore. In every human language, across every channel, the message was the same. Help us. They're coming. We can't stop them. What began as a plea from the stars became humanity's first step into a galactic nightmare. Because the only thing worse than a monster is the thing that makes monsters necessary. In the end, it wasn't diplomacy or technology or unity that saved the galaxy. It was sacrifice. It was fire. And it was the terrifying will of a species the galaxy once feared, but would never underestimate again. Because when the stars cried for help, it was humanity that answered. A transmission burst through every channel. Radio, satellite, subspace. Translated into every human dialect with unnerving precision. Please, they're coming. We can't hold them back. For 72 hours, the signal echoed, pleading, urgent, terrifying. Panic spread like wildfire through Earth's power centers. Scientists, generals, world leaders convened in urgent, sleepless summits, trying to make sense of the first real alien contact. The coordinates traced back to a star cluster 50 light-years distant. And yet somehow the translation was flawless in every language known to man. This has to be manipulation, growled Marshal Draven, slamming a steel fist against the war table. No alien race should know our tongues this intimately. But Dr. Kalin, chief of Xenolinguistic Encryption, shook her head solemnly. There are layered codes, adaptive translators built into the message itself. It's not deception. It's a plea. And it's genuine. Above the Earth, the dreadnought Virion cruised along its routine orbital sweep. Commander Rian Voss studied the fragile blue arc of the world below, unaware that fate had already cast him into the center of a storm. The Virion was Earth's pride, a spearhead of deep space warfare, equipped with weapons forged in the crucible of humanity's long age of blood. Commander called his comms chief. High-priority transmission from High Command. Voss adjusted his jacket, stepping toward the projection array. The face of Fleet Admiral Rourke took form, stern, grizzled, and grave. You've seen the alien broadcast? Yes, sir. Everyone's seen it. We're responding. Virion has been chosen to make contact. Voss's pulse surged. First contact. The dream of generations, now real. Why us, sir? We're a warship, not a peace envoy. Rourke's face tightened. Because this isn't a welcome. It's a warning. They're being hunted. If there's a threat, I want our sharpest blade out front. 3 days passed in a storm of preparation. Earth's once divided nations had spoken with one voice. Humanity would answer the call. On the bridge, Voss addressed his 400-strong crew. We don't know who they are. We don't know what's out there. But we do know someone is begging for help. And Earth has chosen to answer. He paused, gaze sweeping across every face. This mission will be perilous, but it will carve our place into the stars. The Virion ignited its prototype slipstream core. In a radiant blaze, it vanished from orbit, leaving behind only a whisper of light brighter than the sun. Weeks passed in silence. Then arrival. At the marked coordinates, a colossal structure floated in planetary orbit. It was no human design. Graceful arcs, luminous gardens inside crystalline shells. Beauty folded into engineering. We're receiving a hail, said the comms officer. The screen lit up, displaying a lithe, bioluminescent being with 4 arms, its gaze both weary and watchful. Its luminous eyes widened, translucent membranes fluttering in surprise. You truly came. The alien's voice resonated through the same omnilingual matrix that had decrypted their original cry for help. We didn't believe your species would answer. I'm Commander Rian Voss, he said firmly, of the Earth vessel Virion. We received your signal. The alien shuddered, its slender arms curling in a motion that looked like a mix of awe and unease. I am Envoy the Los of the Unity Accord. We broadcasted our distress in every direction, but we never imagined. It hesitated, swallowing something unspoken. Never imagined that Deathborn would come. Deathborn. Voss asked, his brow knitting. Phalos' luminous gaze dimmed with caution. Your homeworld is categorized as a lethal class sphere. Extreme gravity. Toxic biosphere. Apex-level predators. And your own species' violent tendencies. Your kind is spoken of only in warning cycles. Voss exchanged a glance with his bridge officers. Then why call on us? The Los folded its hands in a ritualistic motion, almost like supplication. Because what approaches is darker than anything, even you. We call it the Null Swarm. It leaves only absence in its wake. Our weapons do nothing. Our worlds fall silent. The docking array of the alien installation loomed like a cathedral of glass and light, engineered to welcome vessels from across the stars. Amidst the smooth, radiant hulls of alien craft, the Virion looked menacing, a black dagger among songbirds. Commander Voss led a team of 6 into the airlock. The Los stood waiting with a contingent of beings, each more alien than the last. Some hovered with no visible limbs. One coiled like a serpent of mist. Another shimmered like living gemstones. Welcome to Sanctum Arcadia, the Los said, keeping a careful distance. Please excuse our caution. Your biology is overwhelming to many. Voss gave a respectful nod. We understand. We come with purpose and with aid. The crystalline entity stepped forward, refracting the ambient light in ethereal bursts. I am First Radiant Glim, Speaker of the Council. Your ship, it is forged for battle. It's a frontline dreadnought, Voss replied, equipped for defense and retaliation. Gasps rippled through the alien assembly. A multi-eyed creature let out a faint chirp and collapsed, caught by its companions. The Los whispered, voice quaking, your entire vessel is designed to wage war. Voss didn't flinch. You summoned aid against extinction. What did you expect? Diplomats. Glim's form pulsed with uncertain hues. No, but perhaps scientists. Envoys. Not destroyers. Voss surveyed the elegant station, so clearly crafted for peace, not conflict. No armor. No weapons. Just gardens and light. They had never known war. Not as humans did. Take us to your strategic core, Voss said quietly. Let us see what we're facing. They entered the central dome, a chamber of light and data. Suspended above them, a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of green lights glowed softly. The green markers shimmered across the star map, each a world bound to the Accord. But now on the galactic rim, a crimson blot festered like a spreading infection. The Los pointed solemnly. That is where the Null Swarm began, beyond charted space. It doesn't think. It doesn't reason. It only consumes. Voss leaned closer to the shifting projection. How quickly is it spreading? It has erased 17 inhabited systems in a single cycle, Glim replied, voice brittle. Entire civilizations gone. Nothing left. Lieutenant Sarah Maddox, Voss's tactical lead, stepped forward. What about your defenses? Countermeasures. The aliens hesitated. Glances passed like shadows. We possess deterrence, the Los said slowly. Meant to repel aggression, not to fight extinction. Voss's jaw tightened. Show us what we're dealing with. The image morphed. Now, a serene world wreathed in blue oceans. But above it, a nightmare descended, an endless cloud, writhing and alive. Billions of biomechanical entities, each the size of a ground transport, poured from orbit. Trees crumbled. Beasts evaporated. Cities dissolved into dust. The swarm metabolizes organic matter, the Los explained, barely above a whisper. Everything it touches becomes fuel for replication. Our weapons only delay the inevitable. Silence fell among the humans, the kind of silence that weighs like stone. Then Voss turned to face the council. You ask for aid. You'll have it. But understand this. Humans come from a crucible. Our storms kill. Our wildlife hunts. Even our microbes wage war. We survive by claw and fire. The Los raised his arms in a spiraling motion of uncertainty. What does that mean, Commander? It means, Voss said, eyes steely, our response will be unlike anything you've seen. We won't hold the line. We'll burn the threat from existence. Gasps echoed. Several delegates recoiled. One let out a hiss like boiling liquid. You speak of annihilation? Glim asked, light within him strobing in alarm. I speak of survival, Voss said coldly. Yours and ours. Because if this swarm reaches far enough, Earth will fall too. The council withdrew into hurried whispers, their voices slipping beneath the translator's threshold. At last, the Los approached again. We have no alternative. We accept your aid. But know this, violence is alien to our culture. Your ways may terrify us. Voss gave a curt nod. Then prepare yourselves. I'll need every scrap of data, biology, patterns, vulnerabilities. And then, the Los asked. Then, Voss said, turning toward the exit, I contact Earth. We'll need reinforcements. As the humans vanished into the docking corridor, Glim leaned toward the Los. Have we traded one horror for another? These death-born, they carry war like breath. The Los watched their retreat, every footfall echoing through the polished hall. Perhaps, but the swarm leaves us no options. We must trust that fire can fight fire. Their hope, unspoken, was that the humans would leave when the threat was gone. Aboard the Virion, the biolab thrummed with quiet urgency. Dr. Kayla Mirren leaned over her scope, hands steady, eyes alight with curiosity as she examined preserved fragments of the null swarm collected by the Unity Accord. It had been 3 days since Commander Voss had relayed their findings to Earth. The reply came swiftly. Reinforcements were en route, 5 heavily armed warships and a dedicated science vessel, loaded with experts in xenobiological warfare. Incredible, Mirren murmured, adjusting the lens with care. This isn't like any known life form. Their cells, they're practically rewriting themselves in real time. Lieutenant Maddox stood behind her, arms crossed. Can you find a way to kill them? Mirren looked up, eyes gleaming with the thrill of challenge. Oh yes. Everything breaks under the right pressure. These things are linked, one mind across billions of bodies. But growing this fast? That leaves weaknesses. Meanwhile, on the command deck, Voss stood before the Los and Glim, the strategic holomap aglow before them. The swarm was spreading like wildfire, edging closer to the Unity's core systems. Those 3 systems need immediate evacuation, Voss said, pointing to clusters of green that were soon to vanish beneath the red tide. The Los trembled. 11 billion souls. We don't have the vessels for such an exodus. Then we hold the line, Voss replied, activating a different overlay. We position our fleet here at the Sinar Chasm. It's a gravitational bottleneck. They can't avoid it. Glim dimmed slightly, pulses slowing. You intend to confront them head-on? But our weapons are useless. Ours aren't, Voss said flatly. And Dr. Mirren believes she's found a way to cripple them from within. As if summoned by her name, Mirren entered the chamber, carrying a sealed canister that hissed softly in her grip. Commander, she said, placing it on the table. I've engineered a viral agent. It exploits a flaw in their biology, tears apart their regenerative systems. And it's selective. Other life forms remain unaffected. The Los recoiled from the container. You've designed a plague? A biological countermeasure, Mirren clarified, her voice calm but firm. Not indiscriminate. Not global. Purpose-built to dismantle the swarm. Glim's crystalline surface rippled with agitation. This defies our laws. Life, no matter how twisted, should not be undone by science. Voss's voice turned to iron. The swarm has already erased worlds. You can cling to your principles or survive. A long, brittle silence followed. Then the low spoke, barely audible. How would it be deployed? Mirren tapped the console. A simulation bloomed, missiles streaking toward an infected moon. We load the agent into delivery warheads. Upon impact, it disperses in a reactive mist. The virus spreads rapidly, shutting down cellular replication. They rot from within. They'll begin dying within hours, Mirren continued, her voice calm but electric with urgency. More critically, they'll infect others. The pathogen rides their own network against them. You speak of exterminating trillions, Glemm said, his crystalline tones laced with sorrow. They're consuming your galaxies, Maddox replied sharply. Would you rather feed them more lives? A sudden chime interrupted the debate. Commander, the comms officer said. Earth's fleet just dropped out of Slipstream. General Thane requests immediate contact. Within hours, 6 human vessels formed a wall across the Sinar Chasm, massive warships anchoring the defense line. Behind them, the science vessel Arclight began synthesizing Mirren's pathogen by the ton. From high above, Accord representatives looked on in horrified awe. Humanity moved like a blade unsheathed, precise, unflinching, prepared. Crews armed warheads. Fighters were fueled. Launch bays lit up like constellations of fire. Inbound swarm in 12 hours. General Thane announced during the final command session. Our plan is straightforward. Hold the choke point. Distribute the bioagent. If Dr. Mirren is correct, we'll see collapse within days. The Los stepped forward, solemn as scripture. For 3 millennia, the Accord has lived without weapons. Today, we witness your ways, fearsome yet necessary. We offer no wisdom, only thanks. Voss nodded in return. Sometimes survival demands doing what terrifies us, envoy. 3 days later, the black tide arrived. The void shimmered with movement. The swarm descended like a storm of living metal. Human ships launched wave after wave of delivery missiles. Upon impact, pale clouds expanded, carriers of engineered death. For the first time since its inception, the null swarm recoiled. On the surface of Helion, a planet orbiting a red giant, the remnants of a once flourishing Accord colony now served as a battleground. Where gardens once grew, bunkers now stood. Evacuation craft clawed skyward. Above, Accord frigates provided escort. Below, Earth soldiers dug in. Lieutenant Kale Ryvar watched from the edge of the drop zone, armor battered from weeks of siege. Around him, 50 troops prepped gear and reloaded rifles, their movements methodical, habit born of countless wars. How many still waiting? Ryvar asked the Accord coordinator, a towering, mantis-like being named Trell. 6,000, Trell replied, antennae twitching. But our scanners, the swarm adapts. It's approaching from the northern ridge, faster than we projected. Ryvar's expression hardened. Mirren's virus had been a masterstroke, but the enemy wasn't static. It was learning. We'll hold the corridor, he said. Just make sure your people get out. Trell's multifaceted eyes reflected the amber light of the dying sun. With so few, it seems impossible. Ryvar primed his rifle, the hum of energy cells flaring. We're not built like you. Earth taught us to fight when losing was a guarantee. His radio crackled to life. The comm crackled with static before the words pierced through. Lieutenant, enemy movement. 5 miles out. Closing fast. Ryvar's grip tightened around his rifle. Positions. Get eyes on the advance. And remember, target the synapse clusters. They're still exposed. His squad spread along the shattered ridge overlooking the evacuation zone. The environment fought them at every step. The air was razor thin, gravity crushed the lungs, and the planet's blistering winds had already claimed 2 of their own. But the rest had adapted, because they had to. They're here, Sergeant Naira called from her high perch. Thousands, maybe more. Ryvar raised his field lenses. The horizon swelled with movement. A living tide of chitin and sinew poured across the rocks, flowing like molten flesh. "Wait for the signal," he said. "Don't fire until they breach the targeting line." Then silence shattered. The swarm hit the kill zone. Ryvar gave the cue. The ridge detonated into sound and fury. Explosive rounds lit up the enemy ranks. The front lines of the swarm buckled under the barrage, shredded by calculated firepower. Dozens fell with every volley, but for each slain, more surged behind. "They're adjusting," Naira shouted. "They're rotating formation." Ryvar watched as the mass reconfigured mid-advance, splitting into 3 coordinated arcs. One charged head-on, while the others flanked wide, racing toward the ridges. "That's new," he muttered. "They're adapting. Fast." "What now, sir?" asked a young trooper, panic crawling into his voice. Ryvar scanned the field. The rugged terrain offered an answer. 2 massive ravines carved into the plateau, natural choke points on both sides. "Naira, take your squad to the eastern cut. Detonate charges on my mark. Jackson, same on the west. Set your traps and dig in." The units broke away, disappearing into the ravines. Ryvar's main force held center, intensifying fire and baiting the swarm through the exposed corridor. It worked. The flanks curved inward, avoiding the gulches, driven straight into the funnel. When the timing was right, Ryvar gave the order. Twin eruptions thundered across the cliffs. Rock and debris collapsed into the ravines, crushing hundreds beneath and sealing the flanks. The rest of the force unleashed hellfire on the core column. 3 hours. That's how long they held. Steel against storm. Flesh against hunger. One by one, the civilian transports roared skyward. Smoke, blood, and fire blanketed the battlefield. Last transports airborne. Trell's voice crackled through the radio. "All civilians clear." Ryvar turned to his squad, bloodied, burning, breathless. "Fall back. Extraction inbound. Mission complete." As the gunships broke through the dust-filled sky, Ryvar took one last look back. The battlefield lay silent, unnervingly so. The swarm had halted its surge, clustering together in a pulsating mass. "They're pulling back," Naira said, disbelief in her voice. Ryvar kept his eyes locked on the horizon. "No," he muttered. "Not retreating. Evolving. Next time, they'll hit harder." On board the Unity Accord's command cruiser, Envoy Delos watched the battered human troops disembark. "How many did you lose?" he asked. Ryvar's armor clanked as he stepped down the ramp. 40%, he said, voice empty. "But we held." Delos performed a sacred gesture, arms weaving in reverence. "We've never witnessed sacrifice like this. Your people fight like no other." Ryvar removed his scorched helmet, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "That's why you called us, Envoy. Because sometimes survival means doing what no one else can." Aboard the science vessel Solace, Dr. Kayla Mirren hadn't slept in nearly 3 days. Her lab reeked of antiseptic and ozone, her eyes bleary as she studied the latest batch of swarm tissue under the scanner. What she saw chilled her. "They're adjusting faster than any organism I've ever encountered," she told Commander Voss during an emergency holo briefing. "The pathogen's down to 30% efficiency." Voss looked drained, weeks of fighting etched into his face. "We can't keep losing ground. Every fallback costs another system." General Thane's hologram flickered in. "We've found something, a central hive planet in the Vega sector. Scans confirm it's fully infested, possibly their primary spawning ground." Mirren turned, eyes sharpening. "If I can get samples from the source, I might be able to design a new counteragent, something they've never seen." Voss stared at the star map, deep in swarm-controlled space. "We'll need a full strike fleet to reach that far." "Then we'll send one," Thane said. "Commander Voss, you'll lead the incursion. The Accord will handle transport and logistics. Your mission, get Dr. Mirren in, get her out with viable specimens. The Los, who had listened quietly until now, stepped forward. We will guide you, but we cannot fight. Our vessels have no weapons. Our people no soldiers. Voss nodded once. Just carry us through the fire. We'll handle the burning. 3 days later, the largest armada ever mustered by the Accord crossed into enemy space. At its heart, 6 Terran dreadnoughts formed a moving wall of firepower. Surrounding them, hundreds of transport and support ships moved in tight coordination. The strategy was risky, but clear. Breach the outer swarm perimeter, reach the spawning world, extract samples, and escape. On the Virion's bridge, Voss stared at the flashing alert. Enemy contacts, fast, numerous, closing in. All units, prepare for engagement, he commanded. Accord vessels, pull to minimum combat radius. This next part's on us. The human ships shifted formation, weapon arrays powering up in synchronized rhythm. The void screamed as the swarm rose to meet them. Thousands of smaller swarm entities broke off, encircling the human fleet in a deadly web. They've never organized like this before, Lieutenant Maddox said, scanning tactical feeds. They're learning formation warfare. Then we adapt faster, Voss replied. Initiate delta split. Focus fire on densest clusters. The Terran ships scattered with surgical precision, each banking into divergent assault vectors. Their cannons roared, cutting momentary corridors through the organic onslaught. Main battery charging, called the weapons officer. Target core node and fire, Voss commanded. The Virion quaked as its primary cannon lit up the void, a blinding lance of energy tearing through the swarm's heart. The beam vaporized thousands, leaving a scorched vacuum in its wake. The rest of the fleet joined the barrage, carving a brutal path through the biological storm. The battle lasted 6 relentless hours. 2 Earth vessels were lost, overrun, their crews evacuated by Accord transports in harrowing escapes. But the line held. The fleet broke through. We're above the target world, Voss said to Mirren's team. You have 1 hour. The Solace plunged into the atmosphere, cloaked in fighter escort. Below them lay horror, an entire planet consumed, transformed into a single, pulsating mass. Once oceans, now flesh. Once mountains, now hive. This whole world is alive, whispered one of the scientists. Mirren moved fast, collecting genetic samples from critical zones. These are genesis nodes, she said. The origin points for all replication units. If we can design something to collapse these specifically, before she could finish, the ground ruptured. From the living crust, new horrors emerged, larger, armored, relentless. Contacts. Unknown class, shouted the lead guard. Protect the samples. Mirren ordered as the security team formed a perimeter. The retreat unraveled into chaos. 2 researchers were lost in seconds. Mirren sprinted under cover fire, carrying the sample case close to her chest. She boarded the ship just as the swarm overtook the landing zone. High above, Voss issued the gravest order of his life. Deploy Nova-class warheads. Full saturation, target central hive veins. From orbit, the sky rained fire. Fusion warheads descended, igniting across the creature world surface. The chain detonations flared like suns, flashes that scorched the heavens. Status. General Thane's voice buzzed over comms. Voss stared at the readouts. We hit them hard, but they're already regenerating. In the background, Mirren held her case tightly, eyes fierce. It's enough. I have what I need. As the fleet pulled away, Voss looked back at the burning world, scored, but not destroyed. For the first time, humanity had landed a true blow. But the cost was staggering. Hundreds of soldiers gone, and 2 irreplaceable warships. We won't get another shot like that, Voss told Thane quietly. If Mirren's next weapon doesn't work, we're out of time. Inside Earth's Strategic Command, tension grew by the hour. The Silent Verge, the Accord's flagship, had never felt more claustrophobic. Delegates from 17 species stood in a tight ring around the central command sphere, watching in collective dread as a crimson tide advanced on the holomap, representing the ever-expanding reach of the swarm. "We bought ourselves 3 weeks," Voss said quietly, exhaustion bleeding through every word. Mirren's enhanced strain worked for a moment, but they've mutated again. The new variant is completely immune. On Voithelos, his normally luminescent skin, now a pallid gray, lowered his gaze. "Then we are finished. The Accord has endured for 3 millennia. Now we face erasure." No one spoke. Silence pressed like gravity. 6 weeks of attrition had cost humanity nearly a third of its deployed forces. The Accord had lost 11 colonies, billions of lives either extinguished or displaced. Every victory was fleeting. Every defeat carved permanent scars. "Not yet," said Mirren, stepping forward. Her lab coat was stained, her posture brittle from sleepless nights. "I've been studying their energy attraction patterns. They follow heat, thermal emissions. That's how they locate fertile worlds." Voss lifted his head. "We already know that." "Yes," Mirren replied, "but I'm thinking on a cosmic scale." She tapped the console. A colossal gas giant materialized in the display, swirling storms of red and gold. "This is Cavros, edge of Accord territory, primarily hydrogen and helium, prime fusion material." Elder Glim pulsed with static light. "What are you implying?" Mirren exhaled slowly. "We turn Cavros into a fusion trap, trigger a chain reaction, a controlled ignition. The thermal output will mimic a forming star. The swarm won't resist." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "You want to detonate a planet?" The Los asked, voice thin with disbelief. "Not detonate," Mirren clarified. "Ignite. Lure them to Cavros, then collapse the planetary core. We simulate a miniature supernova. Enough energy to incinerate everything within half a light year." Realization dawned on Voss. A false star to lure them, and a firestorm to end them. The room erupted. Delegates shouted in panic. Fear, ethics, and survival collided in chaos. "This is sacrilege." Glim's voice rose above the din. "Cavros has moons with observatories. 3 nearby systems hold developing ecologies. We destroy everything." Voss stepped forward, his voice raw with weeks of loss. "In 15 days, the swarm reaches your capitals. How many more must die while you hold on to rules your enemy laughs at?" General Thane's hologram flickered to life. "Every tactic has failed. This may be the final lever we can pull." The Los moved to the center, lifting his arms. The room fell silent. "I have seen humans bleed for strangers. Sacrifice for our survival. We asked for saviors," his voice trembled. "But we found fire. Now we must choose, burn with them, or be consumed. Their ways unsettle us," the Los said quietly. "But their sacrifice is undeniable." He turned to Glim. Light dimmed within the Elder's crystalline core. "We must weigh Dr. Mirren's plan." For 6 tense hours, the chamber became a storm of voices. Accord scientists pored over projections, chasing alternatives that didn't exist. None came. Aboard the Virion, Mirren monitored the simulations. Dozens of variables danced across her screen, each one a pivot point between success and oblivion. "The hardest part is timing," she told Voss. "Someone has to trigger the core detonation manually. The radiation levels will block remote activation." Voss stared at the ops brief. "It's a one-way mission." "There's a narrow escape window," she added, hopeful but not deluded. Voss closed the file. "I'll lead the team." Mirren froze. "Commander, no debate," he said firmly. "This is our one shot. I'll take it. I won't order someone else to die." The plan moved into final phase. The swarm, almost as if aware of the bait, began to divert. Their march toward the Accord's heart slowed. Tendrils of the enemy now arced toward Cavros. "It's working," Mirren whispered, eyes fixed on the sensors. "They're converging." Voss assembled his volunteers, 15 men and women, chosen not by rank, but by resolve. They boarded the insertion craft, compact, fast, and armed for one mission only. Envoy Delos met them at the launch bay. "Your willingness, your intent to die, so others may live. We have no word for it in our lexicon." Voss offered a tired half-smile. "We call it courage, Envoy. It's what Deathworlders do." The stealth vessel Firewake dove toward Cavros. Outside the reinforced viewports, the planet's atmosphere seethed, a monstrous swirl of hydrogen storms and electrical chaos. But it wasn't the planet that stole their breath. The void around it pulsed with life. Billions of swarm entities drifted in orbit, drawn by the heat signature Mirren had engineered. The trap had sprung. Final descent. Lieutenant Cell Adams reported from the helm. Her voice was steady, hands dancing over controls even as reality closed in. Target altitude in 5. Voss stood and addressed his team. "We'll have 30 minutes from deployment to get out of the blast zone. No second tries. No rescue." He paused, locking eyes with each of them. "If we succeed, the galaxy breathes again. If we fail, there won't be anyone left to mourn us." No one spoke of survival. They'd all read the odds. The Firewake pierced Cavros's cloud barrier, descending into the storm-racked upper layers. Lightning crackled like veins of molten silver. Giant wind shear currents rocked the craft, but it held. The swarm drifted all around, oblivious for now. At the calculated depth, the team began releasing the fusion catalysts, devices designed to ignite a world. The fusion seed embedded itself in Cavros's core. Primary ignition node planted. The system's tech reported. Warm-up sequence initializing. Voss checked the countdown. 25 minutes to get clear. Move. They turned back toward the Firewake, and the sky broke open. A rogue cyclone, massive and unpredicted, crashed through the upper atmosphere. The ship shuddered violently. Lights dimmed. Sirens howled. Engine 2 offline. Adams shouted, "We're dropping fast." Voss lunged to the engineering console, eyes darting over status readouts. "Can we break orbit on one engine?" The chief engineer didn't answer. He didn't have to. His stricken expression said it all. Not with everyone aboard. The silence in the cabin said the rest. Without hesitation, Voss made the call. "Cut crew to minimum. 5 stay. Everyone else to the escape pods." As the others froze, he continued, voice ironclad. "That's an order. The pods have enough thrust to make it clear. We don't." The argument was brief, but raw. One shouted. Another wept. Then, one by one, 9 team members filed into the pods. The final hatch hissed shut. Voss remained with Adams, the engineer, and 2 others. Their task was now a single thread. Keep the ship alive long enough for the ignition to succeed. 10 minutes to detonation, called the engineer. Above them, the escape pods cleared the storm line, just as the swarm reacted. They noticed. Dozens of clusters peeled away from orbit, streaking toward the fleeing capsules. "They're chasing the pods," Adams said, stunned. "They've taken the bait." Voss opened a secure transmission. "Command, this is Voss. Our position is exposed. Initiate Operation Starfall. Confirm all fleets in fallback range." From orbit, Accord and Terran command ships held their breath. On every sensor, Cavros now radiated extreme heat signatures, exactly as planned. "They're converging," Mirren whispered, watching the display. "Catalyst is stable." Delos and Glim stood silently beside her, witnessing a sacrifice their worlds had never imagined possible. On board the Firewake, the last crew members fought to keep the power stable. Screens flickered. Systems groaned. 2 minutes, shouted the engineer. Voss activated a final open channel. To all vessels, this is Commander Dorian Voss. The ignition core is live and stable. Prepare for final detonation." He paused, letting silence fill the line. "It's been an honor, human or Accord. Whatever comes next, know this: we stood together and refused to vanish quietly." 1 minute left. Then an alert. A miracle. The fail-safes had rerouted auxiliary power. The damaged engine coughed, sparked, and roared. "We have thrust." Adams yelled, climbing hard. The fire wake lurched upward, engines screaming against gravity's grip. Below, the core blazed. The atmosphere ignited in a wave of white fire. Hydrogen and helium collapsed inward. Pressure spiked beyond calculation. Behind them, the catalyst reached ignition threshold. The world began to burn. The ignition triggered. Cavros burned. For a single, searing instant, a new sun bloomed across Accord space, an artificial star born of desperation. The thermal shock wave surged outward at near light speed, obliterating everything in its reach. In that blinding pulse, 90% of the swarm was incinerated. Entire clusters vanished in silence, consumed by the very heat that had lured them. 3 days later, a miracle emerged. A fractured escape capsule was recovered adrift by a Border Patrol frigate. Inside, barely clinging to life, were Commander Voss and Lieutenant Sel Adams, the only survivors of the Firewake's final flight. 1 month passed. In the high rotunda of the Accord conclave, humanity stood not as strangers, but as saviors. Ornate banners hung from the vaulted walls. Species from across the stars gathered in solemn silence. Envoy Delos stepped forward. For 3,000 years, we believed peace alone defined progress. That force was a relic of primitive minds. But the swarm showed us otherwise. He turned to Voss, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from a world that no longer existed. They came not seeking war, but bearing the strength we lacked. They did not fight for conquest, but for us. Beside him, Elder Glim pulsed a radiant cascade of color. Today, the Accord extends to Earth a place not just among our worlds, but above them. You will not join as members, but as defenders, a role only your kind can fulfill. Voss stood shoulder to shoulder with Mirren and the remaining Terran delegation. He bowed, slow and deliberate. "Earth accepts, and we thank you for your trust and for the chance to grow beside you. May your wisdom guide our strength." Across 100 worlds, monuments rose in steel and stone, tributes to the Terran lives lost in the battle against annihilation. Every name etched, every sacrifice remembered. On Earth, the revelation shook civilization to its core. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and they had already saved it. In the years that followed, the last remnants of the swarm were hunted and destroyed. The Accord, once pacifist by design, began to form its own planetary defense forces, built under Terran guidance. And far beyond the rim of known space, in a quiet orbit around a dead world, a warning beacon was planted. It pulsed a simple message into the dark, a record of the threat that once consumed galaxies and the brutal creatures who stopped it. Years later, when asked to speak about those days, Voss would simply say, "They feared our world, called us monsters born from chaos and pain. Then the stars needed monsters to stand and fight." He looked out over the stars, and instead they found friends. If that story lit a fire in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe for more tales where humanity stands against the impossible. Like the video if you believe monsters can be heroes. And let me know in the comments, would you have answered the call? For 300 years, Earth was silent. The galaxy moved on. Humanity was forgotten until today. Now the stars are trembling because something is coming, and it remembers everything. Before we begin, If you're drawn to stories of lost civilizations' epic returns, and humanity rewriting its destiny among the stars, make sure you're subscribed. This is one you won't forget. Commander Ryland Cale stood before the fractured viewport of the starseed Ark, watching the crimson twilight bleed across the skies of Virilia Prime. The planet had sheltered 3,000 souls for half a century, but it never embraced them. It wasn't home, not truly. Home was a distant sapphire orb dancing around a sun they hadn't seen in 300 years. Home was Earth, and Earth had gone quiet. He pressed a weathered palm to the freezing alloy wall beside him. Another rotation. Another day clawing toward survival. The harvests were dying, again, despite Dr. Alira Ven's latest attempts to stabilize the hybrid soil. The filtration towers groaned for parts they no longer had the means to forge. And worse still, the Dravik marauders had resurfaced near the fringe mines. "Commander Cale, report to Central," came the voice of Narrowin, sharp through the comm line. She had managed comms for the last 5 years, ever since her parents were vaporized in the last Dravik raid. At just 23, she was one of the youngest bridge officers he'd ever served with. But she was unshakable. Ryland paced briskly down the tight passageways of the vessel. Starseed Ark had been a marvel once, back when she left orbit above Earth 2 centuries ago. Now she bore the weight of time, oxidized scars crawling down the walls where scrubbers failed, power flickers from unstable capacitors. Every system held together by jury-rigged scraps and stubborn faith. The command bay was small, claustrophobic. Nara sat at her console, sunlight catching the golden strands of her tied-back hair. Her fingers flew across ancient controls. Behind her stood Marek Dahl, their lead mechanic, Amy's age, shipborn, and tempered by hardship. For them, Earth was a bedtime myth whispered by the elders. "What are we facing?" Ryland asked. Nara turned. Her emerald eyes held dread. Long-range echo shows 3 Dravik warcraft inbound. ETA. 6 hours. Ryland's chest tightened. 3 ships meant 3 warlords and their battalions. The Dravik, scaled giants bred for destruction, stood over 7 feet tall, with talons like plasma-forged blades. War was their language. To them, humans were a resource. Or prey. "How many can we field?" he asked, voice low. Marek glanced down at his data slab. 200, if we include everyone over 16. But most of them? They've never held a weapon. They're engineers, growers, not fighters. Ryland gave a slow, grim nod. When Earth fell silent, its children scattered across the stars. Some settlements had gone dark without a whisper. Others, like theirs, had simply refused to die. Some had been taken in chains. Others, like this colony, had endured by vanishing into the stars. But every sanctuary eventually ran out of shadows. Dr. Ven, report to command. Ryland called over comms. Alira Ven stepped onto the bridge moments later. Mid-40s, streaks of silver threading through chestnut hair. Her presence carried weight. She'd led the science corps longer than Ryland had been alive. She also held the rare burden of first-hand memories of oceans, forests, and blue skies on a world no one had seen in centuries. "Alira, where do we stand on defense?" he asked. She exhaled through her nose. "Shields are drained 30%, maybe less. Weapons? Half of them are down. We're missing modules we haven't been able to replicate in years. If 3 Dravik cruisers engage us, we'll be ash in 10 minutes. Ryland eased into the command seat, his grandfather's chair, then his father's. 3 generations of Cales had clung to the edge of survival here. Sometimes he wondered if all they'd done was delay the inevitable. "What about the outer enclaves?" he asked Nara. "Any response from Haven's Reach or Calder's Refuge?" Her face went pale. Haven's Reach stopped transmitting 14 days ago. Calder sent a priority distress beacon 3 nights back. Then nothing. A heavy silence fell across the deck. The implications hung there, unspoken. The Dravik weren't just hunting. They were cleansing the void of the last freeborn humans. Colony by colony. Soon, they'd finish what they started. Ryland scanned the weary faces of his bridge crew. They still looked to him for solutions. But there was no clear path left. The Starseed Ark couldn't outrun a Dravik fleet. Its weapons were pitiful by comparison. And as for hiding, there were no dark corners left in this arm of space. There might be one path we haven't taken, Elira said softly. Ryland turned to her. What is it? We could try reaching Origin. Everything stopped. Not a sound. Not a breath. Marek spoke first. Origin's gone silent. For 300 years. You know the stories. Everyone does. It's dead. Elira shook her head. No. We only know they stopped answering. That's not the same. Nara turned slowly to her panel. I've kept tabs on the Sol region for half a decade. There's never been any transmission, any sign. Lack of response doesn't mean absence, Elira interrupted. Maybe they stopped talking. Maybe they had reasons. Ryland leaned back. She was right. The truth was, no one really knew what had happened on Earth. One day, it had simply fallen silent. Trade convoys stopped appearing. Data relays went dark. Quantum relays that once lit up the galaxy like constellations blinked out. Earth became a ghost. The so-called Dominion Council, now ruled by the Dravik overlords and their crystalline allies, the Zalari, had written humanity off, declared them gone, extinct. The Dominion had carved up human territory like scavengers at a feast. The last flickering colonies, like Kale's, were labeled irrelevant, crumbs of a failed race. But what if Earth hadn't perished? What if it still breathed, veiled in silence for reasons unknown? What if Origin's still alive? Ryland asked quietly, still listening, just not answering. Elira approached Nara's console. The quantum lattice relays still exist. They were built to span the entirety of human-occupied space. If they're out there, they'll hear us, she said. And if they aren't, Marek cut in, we'll burn power reserves we can't afford to lose. Ryland turned from them and walked back toward the main viewport. Beyond it, Virilia's red sun dipped beneath the jagged horizon, bleeding orange fire across the sky. Within hours, the Dravik warships would arrive. Either they die or be dragged away in chains. 3 centuries of survival, buried in one final battle. Unless Origin was still out there, unless home was still listening, he faced them again, his voice steady. Send the transmission. Nara's fingers danced over the dust-covered controls of the quantum relay array. The machine groaned as ancient power lines surged with energy, systems dormant for decades roaring back to life. The transmitter was older than any of them, built in an age when Earth still spoke to its children. Now, it might be the last lifeline they had. Energy flow is stable, Marek reported from engineering. But this load is massive. If it fails, we'll have nothing left for shielding when they arrive. Ryland stood behind Nara, eyes fixed on the flickering display. How long until it reaches Earth? He asked. Elira, tablet in hand, ran the numbers. Roughly 6 hours through folded space. The same time we have left, Nara whispered. Dravik ships hit orbit in 6. She turned to him. What should I say? He hesitated. What could you say to a world that had fallen silent for 300 years? What words reached across a chasm of time, of grief, of absence? Keep it clear, he said softly. Tell them who we are. Tell them we need them. Nara nodded. Then she began to type. Her message was simple, heavy. This is Ark Vessel Starseed, transmitting from the Virilia system. We are the last known human colony in this sector, under assault by Dravik warships. If Origin still stands, if anyone hears this, please respond. We need you. She pressed the final key. The core lit up with a pulse of cobalt light as the ancient relay screamed to life. The signal tore into quantum space, faster than light, faster than thought, racing toward the forgotten cradle of humanity. The signal screamed through the Orally system, racing faster than comprehension, propelled by fractured spacetime itself. "It's gone," Nara whispered. "The transmission's out." Now they waited. The next hours crawled by like a funeral march. Ryland tried to keep morale intact, but everyone understood this wasn't a fight they could win. Their defenses were relics, their weapons barely functional, and the Dravik warships loomed closer by the minute. In engineering, Marek worked without pause, hands blackened with grease and plasma scoring. "Shields are holding at 40%, he called out. "That's the best we're going to get without a full grid overhaul." Elira led the evacuation protocols, guiding families and elders to the reinforced core of the starseed. Hidden chambers layered in dense alloys offered the illusion of safety. But if the Dravik broke through, nowhere would be safe. Nara stayed at her post, eyes locked to the receiver interface. Waiting, praying. Only the metronomic pings of a long-range scanner reminded them time hadn't stopped, just their hope. Then, 5 hours after they launched their message into the void, everything changed. Nara's console flared to life in a riot of sound and color. Warning chimes echoed across the bridge. Systems spiked into overload. "I've got something," she gasped, disbelief cracking her voice. Picking up quantum resonance from the Orally system. Massive. Ryland lunged to her station. "What is it?" Her hands danced across the controls. "I don't know, it's astronomical. Captain, this signal is like watching a sun ignite. It's overwhelming our receivers." The forward display stuttered and flashed before stabilizing into the quantum imprint of the incoming transmission. The energy signature alone was destabilizing their processors. Systems built for a quieter age buckled under the weight of whatever had just answered them. And then, through the static, a voice. "This is Admiral Kalen Sorrell of the Terran Ascendancy Fleet." Silence fell across the bridge like gravity. No one moved. No one breathed. Earth had answered. 3 centuries of silence shattered in a single sentence. The voice continued, steady and resolute, vibrating with command and strength. "To all remaining human outposts, stand firm. The stars belong to us again. Reinforcements are en route. You are not alone." Ryland's knees almost gave way. He gripped the edge of Nara's console, heart pounding. "The Ascendancy Fleet," he whispered. Elira's eyes widened, filled with awe. "They're alive. Earth never fell." Marek stared at the diagnostic feed. "Captain, these power readings, the surge we're seeing, it's beyond anything I've ever encountered. It's not just a fleet, it's an armada. That kind of transmission shouldn't exist," Marek whispered, eyes wide. "You'd need the raw output of a star to push a signal that powerful." Nara was already working the interface. "There's more, signal still live. I'm boosting filtration." Then the voice returned, clearer now, resonating through every speaker on the bridge with unshakable authority. "This broadcast is intended for all Terran descendants within former Alliance territories," Admiral Sorrell's voice declared. "We've watched your trials. We've borne witness to your survival. While the galaxy turned away, we endured, and we evolved. The moment has come. We are reclaiming what is ours." Ryland turned toward his crew. No one spoke. No one blinked. Every face was frozen, wrapped with awe, hearts igniting with something most of them hadn't felt in years. Hope. The Admiral's voice surged again. And this time it wasn't just a beacon, it was personal. "To the crew of Ark Vessel Starseed," she said, and Ryland's breath hitched. She was speaking to them. "Your distress call was received. Dravik ships are closing on your coordinates. Do not engage. Remain stationary. Reinforcements inbound. Arrival in 47 minutes." Nara looked up from her console, tears brimming in her eyes. "They're coming for us. Earth is coming for us. Though the transmission ceased, the core still pulsed with quantum fire. Earth hadn't vanished again. No, she was speaking, alive and unrelenting, calling to her forgotten children scattered across the void. Rylan activated internal comms. His voice, once weary, now rang with a strength born of revelation. "This is Commander Kale to all hands aboard the Starseed," he said. "What I'm about to tell you will reshape everything you've ever believed. Contact has been made. Earth is alive. And they're coming." His words echoed through bulkheads and corridors, finding their way into every heart. Gasps turned to cheers. Stoic colonists wept openly. Generations raised on second-hand stories now knew the truth. The cradle of humanity was real and reaching for them. In the med bays, the grow chambers, and even the cold metal of the lower decks, people shouted and hugged and cried. Earth, long thought a myth, was more than memory. It was home, and it had not forgotten them. But Rylan couldn't ignore the unease curling in his chest. There'd been something strange in Admiral Sorrell's tone. Not just authority, something beyond human. The kind of resolve forged not in peace, but in something vast and unknowable. And the energy readings, still off the scale, defied every natural law they understood. What had Earth become during its centuries of silence? What kind of power now moved beneath its skies? As Rylan stared into the infinite black beyond the viewport, he couldn't help but wonder if the answer was coming faster than they were ready for. Because at that very moment, on the dot, Nara sensors chimed. The Dravik ships had arrived. Right on cue, they came. 3 Titanic warships tore from subspace at the edge of the Virilia system. Monsters cloaked in jagged armor and bristling with weaponry. Each vessel dwarfed the Starseed by miles, their hulls plated with serrated alloy and fusion lances that could rupture moons. Commander Rylan Kale stared at the tactical feed. 30 minutes. That's all the time they had until Earth's promised arrival. 30 minutes to survive the impossible. "Incoming hail from the Dravik flagship," Nara reported. "Patch it through," Rylan said. The screen sputtered, then locked onto the enemy bridge. There, towering above a throne of alloy thorns, stood War Chieftain Zalzeth, a reptilian colossus with slit pupils and serrated fangs. His skin was cross-hatched with ceremonial scars, each marking a conquest. "Terran vessel," he hissed, his words fractured and guttural. "You will yield. Your crew will be broken. You belong to the Dominion now. Resist and die." Rylan stepped forward. "This is Commander Kale of the Starseed. We are under Terran ascendancy protection. Vacate this system. Now." Zalzeth snarled, a sound like steel grinding glass. "Earth," he spat. "The corpse world?" Still whispering that myth. "Earth hasn't spoken in 3 centuries. It is ash drifting." "Earth has awakened," Rylan said. "Their fleet is en route." The Dravik leader bared his teeth in something twisted, almost a grin. "Then we'll crush them too. You have 5 minutes. Surrender or be erased." The feed cut. On the bridge, the tension thickened like pressure before a storm. Marek's hands flew over engineering panels. "Shields won't last 5 minutes," he muttered. Elira kept scanning their depleted systems, calculating and recalculating failure points. Nara was still glued to her sensors. 28 minutes until contact," she whispered. Rylan was about to give the order to prepare for final engagement when alarms screamed to life across the console. "Captain, something's happening." Nara shouted. "Report." "I'm detecting enormous power surges across the entire system." The main screen shifted, displaying the Virilia sector from high orbit. Dozens, no hundreds, of anomalies began blinking into existence across the grid. They weren't exiting subspace. They were simply appearing. "What the hell are those?" Rylan demanded. Nara was typing furiously. "They're not using conventional drives. They're just manifesting." Then he saw them. Ships, unlike any craft ever conceived by human or alien minds. They moved like phantoms, shimmering with elegance. Their hulls flowed like liquid silver, shaped in graceful curves that caught and twisted the starlight. It was impossible to focus on them, like the eye refused to believe they were real. Sleek, silent, infinite. 50 of them. No more. 100, Nara whispered, almost reverently. Stunned silence gave way to gasps across the Starseed's bridge. The unknown fleet had encircled the Dravik armada like wolves surrounding prey. On board the enemy flagship, War Chieftain Zalzeth roared incoherent orders, his clawed hands slashing through the air. Even the hardened Dravik warriors, veterans of 100 sieges, froze at the sight. These Terran vessels defied everything they knew. No visible thrusters, no heat signatures. They turned without inertia, hovered without propulsion, and shimmered as though half-anchored in another dimension. A fresh transmission cut through the chaos, and Ryland instantly recognized the voice. Commander Zalzeth of the Dravik Imperium, Admiral Kalen Sorrel said with icy calm, "You have violated sovereign Terran space. You are ordered to disengage and withdraw, or suffer the consequences." The display shifted again, revealing the Terran flagship. It was colossal, nearly triple the size of Zalzeth's dreadnought, but its presence wasn't just size. It moved like a living thing, its gleaming hull bending starlight, every curve elegant and deliberate. Then Sorrel herself appeared on screen. She looked young 40s, perhaps, with sharp-cut brown hair and ocean-hued eyes that hid vast depths Ryland couldn't begin to fathom. "I am Admiral Kalen Sorrel, commander of the Ascendancy Fleet," she said, voice steady. "This colony is under our protection. Depart now, and no harm will come to you." Zalzeth's image reappeared, seething with defiance. "You do not frighten us, Terran. We are the Imperium. We have broken empires." Sorrel's response was quiet, final. "That ends now." What followed defied all logic. The Dravik opened fire, plasma lances, antimatter projectiles, high-yield fusion torpedoes, all weapons blazing in synchronized fury. The void lit up like a dying star. Enough ordnance to raise planets bore down on the Terran fleet. None of it struck. The Terran ships didn't raise shields. They didn't counterfire. They simply existed outside the rules. Plasma veered off course mid-flight. Missiles slowed, twisted, turned around, and rocketed back toward their launchers. Beam weapons bent like light through water. Marek's jaw dropped. "This isn't tech. I don't even have language for this." Alira stared at the sensor data, eyes wide. They're not resisting the attack. They're rewriting the rules around it. Sorrel's voice returned, unshaken. "Commander Rian Voss, demonstrate local field manipulation." Another voice answered, smooth and precise. "Affirmative, Admiral. Engaging gravitational compression." Ryland watched frozen, as the void near the Dravik ships began to ripple, space folding like silk in unseen hands. The enemy vessels, millions of tons of armored metal, started drifting. Not by choice. Their engines flared, struggling, but the ships drifted toward each other. They couldn't escape. "Cease this." Zalzeth howled over comms. "What sorcery is this?" "Not sorcery," Admiral Sorrel replied. "Just science beyond your reach." A third voice entered, calm and clinical. "This is Dr. Lyra Voss. Allow me to clarify exactly what you're experiencing. You're currently inside a stabilized gravity shell," said the calm, disembodied voice. "We've compressed the quantum weave around your ships. Your weapons are non-functional because local physics no longer obey your engineering. Your engines can't respond because we now govern the fabric of space." The Dravik warships, once mighty instruments of destruction, now floated helpless, compressed into a tight formation, powerless. Their weapon systems were frozen. Their hulls groaned under invisible pressure. But their crews remained unharmed. "This is your final notice," Admiral Sorrel said evenly. "Depart from Terran space. Do not return. Spread the truth through your empire, Earth has returned, and we protect our own. Zalzetha's reply came through, no longer proud, no longer angry, but broken. We yield, we will go, just let us leave. And just like that, the pressure vanished. The Dravik ships broke formation, their engines flaring with desperation. They fled toward the edge of the system at full thrust, as if the stars themselves were chasing them. Ryland stood motionless, struggling to comprehend what he'd witnessed. In less than 10 minutes, the Terran fleet had dismantled 3 warships, without firing a single weapon. Admiral Sorrell's image returned to the Starseed's main display. This time, her expression held something unexpected, a quiet smile. "Commander Kale, this is Admiral Kalen Sorrell," she said, "requesting permission to board. We have much to discuss." He finally found his voice. "Permission granted, Admiral, and welcome home." As he spoke, the reality hit him. Nothing would ever be the same. Earth hadn't simply returned, it had transcended. The old world had vanished into silence 3 centuries ago. What had come back was something greater, something changed. But what would that mean for the galaxy? A moment later, Admiral Sorrell appeared on the bridge. Not via shuttle, not through a transporter array. One moment, the space beside him was empty. The next, it wasn't. She stood there, as if she'd always been there, calm and real and impossible. "Commander Kale," she said warmly, offering her hand. "It's good to meet you in person." He took it. Her grip was solid, real, and yet something about her defied description. "How did you?" "Phase modulation," she replied simply. "We operate across layered dimensional fields now. Physical barriers are mostly irrelevant to us." Dr. Alira then stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. "Admiral, what happened to Earth? How did we become this?" The Admiral's smile faded into gravity. 3 centuries ago, we stood at a crossroads. We could struggle onward, bound by old limits, or we could evolve past them. We chose evolution. Admiral Sorrell turned toward the viewport, her gaze fixed on the silver-lit fleet hanging silently in the void, each vessel like a star frozen in mid-thought. "We uncovered something the rest of the galaxy still fears to acknowledge," she said softly. "Consciousness and matter are entwined, inseparable at the quantum layer. Understanding that changed everything." Nara looked up from her comm station, stunned. "You mean you can move matter with your mind?" "In essence," Sorrell replied. "But it's deeper than simple thought. We learned to commune with the underlying quantum field, the thread that binds all of existence. Every human on Earth now lives both as a physical form and as a quantum resonance." Marek's eyes darted across his readouts, his voice hushed. "I don't understand these readings. Your ships are pulling energy from nowhere, power that doesn't register in any spatial dimension." A voice came through the Starseed's bridge from the Terran flagship, calm, crisp, and authoritative. "Commander Rian Voss," it said, "we're drawing from vacuum resonance, the zero field between atoms, a sea of latent energy far greater than any star. We simply learned how to open the tap." Ryland felt the full weight of it settle over him. "So, everyone on Earth can do this now." "In time," Sorrell said, "all of humanity, wherever they've survived, will share in it. That's why we're here, to unify what was scattered, to bring our people home." Before he could speak again, alarm screamed from Nara's console. "Captain, long-range sensors just lit up. We've got a massive fleet incoming." Sorrell didn't flinch. "The Galactic Concord is reacting to our return. They're throwing everything they have at us." On the central screen, the tactical map shifted. Ryland saw it, an approaching wall of ships. Hundreds. Dravik dreadnoughts. Crystalline crystal-forged spires. High fleet carriers. Vessels from a dozen species, their lights flaring like knives in the dark. A force beyond comprehension. "They're afraid," Sorrell said, still perfectly composed. For 300 years, they split up Terran space, enslaved colonies, annihilated resistance. Now they fear what we've become. They assume we've returned to avenge ourselves. A new voice chimed in from the fleet. Dr. Lyra Voss again. Admiral confirmed scan. Over 800 vessels. 17 empires. Full spectrum assault configuration. Ryland's chest tightened. Not even Earth's impossible ships could stand against that. Could they? But Sorrel's eyes met his, and she smiled, faint and strange. Would you like to see what humanity truly is now? She inhaled, closed her eyes. The air around her shimmered. The lights shifted. No, reality shifted. The tactical display flared to life. And Ryland gasped. The Terran fleet was expanding, new vessels emerging from nowhere. Not through drives, not through space, but into existence itself. Ship after ship blinked into being, not arriving, but becoming. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. The Terran fleet multiplied across the system like a thought made real. Each vessel shimmered with that same impossible design. Each one manned by volunteers, quantum avatars projected across unfathomable distances, ready to defend kin they'd never met. We no longer move fleets through space, Admiral Sorrel explained. We create them on demand. Our people project their consciousness wherever they're needed, fully aware, fully present. The Coalition Armada finally arrived. At its center loomed Supreme Commander Virex of the Dravik Dominion, his dreadnought flanked by the galaxy's most devastating warships. Across open frequencies, Ryland heard the cacophony of alien admirals locking into formation, issuing kill orders, coordinating what they believed would be Earth's annihilation. This ends now, Admiral Sorrel said softly. She opened her eyes, and in them, Ryland saw why the galaxy feared Earth. These weren't the humans who had once begged for a seat at the council. The battle began, except it wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The Armada unleashed everything. Graviton pulses, antimatter lances, dark energy torpedoes, weapons designed to fracture moons, melt continents, unravel quantum structures. It didn't matter. The Terran fleet glided through the assault like ghosts. Particle beams passed harmlessly through hulls. Missiles phased through targets as if hitting reflections on water. And when the Terrans answered, they didn't fire a single shot. Dr. Lyra Voss's voice crackled over the comms, collected, serene. Beginning precision-scale quantum field revision. Targeting enemy weapon systems. No biological impact. On every screen, Ryland watched the enemy fleet unravel. Cannons fell silent. Shields dissolved. Reactors flickered and died. Engine trails faded to nothing. In moments, 800 warships, representing the power of 17 empires, became cold, drifting husks. How? Ryland whispered. We rewrote local law sets, Sorrel said. In the space around those vessels, the chain reactions that power combustion simply don't happen anymore. Then, a fractured voice cut across all frequencies, raw with panic. What have you done to us? Supreme Commander Virex shouted. Our ships are dead. We're powerless. Sorrel's voice rose in reply, not shouted, but vast. And it echoed through every bridge, every cockpit, every mind. You came to erase us because you feared what we've become. You were right to fear, but you didn't need to fight. Her words carried the weight of a civilization long denied. For centuries, you enslaved our survivors. You took our worlds. You erased us from your records and called us extinct. She paused. The silence felt sacred. That ends now. A second voice joined, firm and unyielding. General Laron Vance, from one of the newly manifested Terran cruisers. You now have a choice, he said. Yield to what comes next, or stand against the new order we've begun, General Vance finished, and suffer the consequences of resistance. They had no choice. One by one, The ancient powers that had ruled the stars for millennia began to yield. The Dravik Dominion, the Chrysalline Accord, the Hive Clusters, all bent the knee. Each sovereign force, once mighty, now bowed before the quiet, undeniable force of Terran will. Admiral Sorrel turned toward Rylan. Her voice softened. "Commander Kale, would you like to see your new home?" Before he could respond, the view through the observation dome shifted, and his breath caught. Beyond the starseed, the Terran fleet had begun constructing something monumental. No tools, no raw materials, just thought. A radiant structure bloomed in space, a ring world of impossible scale, forming molecule by molecule under directed quantum control. Oceans shimmered, trees unfurled in seconds, parks, habitats, towering forests under vaulted skies. A sanctuary created mid-orbit in mere minutes. "A new chapter for humanity," Sorrel said, smiling. "The stars are ours now, but we're not here to conquer. We're here to restore." Ryland stared at the defeated fleets drifting in silence. Everything had changed. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months passed. Ryland Kale, no longer captain, but now Terran liaison to Kepler Station, stood on the promenade of the orbital cradle humanity had built. It was unlike anything that had existed before, a harmonious fusion of nature and post-physical design. It hummed in multiple realities, visible in one dimension, echoing in another. Below, the surface of Kepler 62F had transformed. Where once struggling settlements clung to survival, now radiant arcologies blossomed, alive with light and song. Rivers of silver water flowed beside bio-architected towers. Fields of fusion-grown crops waved under engineered skies. No hunger, no poverty, no disease. Dr. Serene Vale and her quantum medical teams had abolished illness, redesigned DNA, and extended healthy life to every citizen under Terran care. Nearby, Nara stood at her new station, no longer manning a simple comms deck, but interfacing directly with a Terran quantum mesh. Her eyes glowed softly, transmission active. Through that mesh, any mind could reach another instantly across the stars. It was more than communication. It was communion. "Any updates from the distant branches?" Rylan asked. Nara smiled, the light fading from her irises. "New Aurelia reports stable terraforming. They've reached 50,000 colonists, preparing to host a new hub." She paused. "And Astris Prime just launched its first dimensional scaffold. Full spectral synthesis. They're ready." Marek approached, looking reborn. No longer a tired engineer, now a node-linked architect of living systems. Earth had evolved, and it was bringing its children with it. Everywhere, something inside Marek had awakened. Since the Terran fleets arrived, his hands could interface with machines in ways he couldn't explain. Circuits responded to his touch. Systems whispered their problems into his thoughts. Designs once needing decades of research came to him in moments of stillness. "The Ascendancy Academy is fully operational," he reported. "Dr. Voss plans to begin interspecies orientation next week." Rylan nodded. The Academy was a cornerstone of Earth's greater vision, to carefully elevate select alien civilizations into the realm of heightened consciousness. The process wasn't universal. Not every species could withstand the metamorphosis, but those who could found themselves woven into something vast and beautiful. Dr. Elise Thane stepped onto the observation deck beside them. She had once been among the eldest survivors of Kepler's colony. Now, post-expansion, she moved with ageless grace. The lines on her face were gone, and she could reshape molecular bonds with a mere glance. Her planetary research was already rewilding entire systems. "The Vok delegation has arrived," she said gently. "Admiral Sorrel requested your presence." Ryland still found it surreal. High Warden Vecth, once the architect of raids that had devastated human colonies, now served as Earth's envoy to his people. The Vok, once conquerors, had found deeper fulfillment in purpose than in domination. Together, they made their way toward the central assembly chamber. That chamber defied logic, half anchored in physical space, half phased into the quantum strata. Representatives from across the galaxy could attend in real time without leaving their homeworlds, each within their native atmosphere light years apart, yet present as one. Admiral Sorrel stood at the room's focal point, unchanged. Rylan now understood that time held no sway over her. She wore the form she chose, one shaped by will, not age. She offered him a warm nod. "Commander Kale, excellent timing. We're formalizing the inception of a new galactic accord." Rylan took his seat beside Warden Vecth and Crystallarch Jeanne of the Luminari. Jeanne's words entered his mind not as language, but as symphonic waves, harmonic vibrations forming thought. "The transition is proceeding more fluidly than anticipated," Jeanne said. "Our collective welcomes humanity's guidance." Vecth added his voice, low and resonant, his deference unmistakable. "The Vok Dominion seeks full integration into the Terran Consciousness Network. Our blades now yearn to shield, not strike." Sorrel inclined her head. "Dr. Voss's team will begin evaluations next cycle. But remember, the shift cannot be forced. Expansion of consciousness must emerge through alignment, not acceleration. Artificially induced awakening leads only to fragmentation." Rylan still marveled at it all. Months ago, they were clinging to survival, shadows scattered across hostile stars. Now, they were building a civilization of light. And somehow, through all the mystery and change, humanity had not only returned. It had become something entirely new. It was still hard for Kale to fully accept that the same species who once hunted humanity through the stars now petitioned for communion. But he had seen the shift with his own eyes. Vok warriors, still fierce, still proud, had shed their hunger for domination. What remained was courage without cruelty, strength repurposed for protection. As the summit continued, emissaries from across the galaxy shared revelations. The High Brood, once a relentless swarm, had restructured around symbiosis rather than conquest. The Nebulites, sentient vapor forms, had begun weaving ephemeral masterpieces from resonant fields, quantum art that required shared consciousness to even perceive. And civilizations that had waged endless war for generations now sat in mutual reflection, connected by Terran-guided harmonics. After the proceedings, Rylan found himself alone with Admiral Sorrel. They stood at the apex of the station's upper ring, gazing across the starfield. Earth shimmered in the distance, a living sapphire radiating strands of luminous energy. His heightened senses saw more than light now. He could feel the flow of thought across the system. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "When humans were simpler?" Sorrel tilted her head, considering. "There was a purity in our limitations," she said. "A kind of innocence in not yet knowing how vast reality truly is." She motioned to the cosmos. "But I don't mourn what we left behind. Not anymore." Through Rylan's perception, the stars were no longer cold points of light. They were living nodes in a radiant web, threads of awareness flowing between them. He understood now what Earth had become. 3 centuries ago, humanity had been scattered and forgotten, tattered remnants adrift in a violent galaxy. Now, they were midwives to something greater. Below them, laughter echoed from the station's central atrium. Rylan watched as young humans and alien children played together, phasing in and out of dimensional layers, creating spontaneous games that defied classical physics. Among them was Nara's daughter, just 3 months old, already surpassing even Earth's earliest quantum pioneers in sensitivity and control. "What comes next?" Rylan asked. Admiral Sorrel's gaze drifted to the horizon, where galaxies drifted like lanterns on an ocean of mind. "We evolve," she said. "We guide. We help others rise beyond their limits." Then, after a pause, "And maybe one day we shed the need for form entirely." Ryland thought of the long road behind them, from that rusting arc in a red sky to this, co-architects of a galactic awakening. It once would have seemed like fantasy, but so had Earth's return. Far below, the planet continued to blossom. Cities of radiant architecture spiraled upward in harmonic spirals. Trees of crystal light stretched across continents, rooted in one world, branching into others. And above it all, the sky had become a canvas, painted not with pigment, but with intention, flowing and reshaping with each shared breath of a collective soul. Admiral Sorrel placed a steady hand on Ryland's shoulder. "You held the line," she said softly. "When Earth fell silent, it was people like you who kept the spark alive. Without that, there would have been no one left to return to." Ryland's chest rose with a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Centuries of silent struggle finally lifted. "And now," he asked, "what's my place in this reborn galaxy?" Her eyes sparkled with something deeper than light. "Whatever you wish it to be," she replied. "Chart the edge of creation. Help awaken species who are ready. Or stay here, bask in the world you helped preserve. The choice is yours now." He turned back to the stars. But they weren't stars anymore. They were invitations, gateways, possibilities. For the first time in 3 centuries, there were no walls around what humanity could become. A race once dismissed as fractured and dying had become the architects of a new epoch. Earth hadn't returned to dominate. It had come to illuminate. And as the galaxy turned beneath them, woven with light, life, and mind, Ryland understood. The age of humanity had not merely begun. It had transcended. And it was more wondrous than anything they had ever dared to dream. Earth returned not with vengeance, but with vision. If this story moved you, imagine what comes next. Subscribe and join us as we explore the future humanity was never supposed to have.